The Maple Leafs fall to the Panthers in overtime. Welcome into Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at Bodog.net. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter, who comes to us from Scotiabank Arena, where the Maple Leafs were 3-2 losers to the Panthers in overtime. And this one, a tough one to swallow, Dave, for the Maple Leafs in the grand scheme of things. It, doesn't have too much of an impact on the playoff race. The Leafs still in control of their own destiny, of course, trying to finish with home ice advantage in the first round against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But I was trying to figure out, where to start with this one, and how can it not be the play of Alex Lyon, as I saw some of the tweets coming out. His teammates calling him the Lyon King, which is incredible. One of the best performances of his career, and I don't think many people knew about him coming in. You look at the guy's career track record at the NHL level. He's 30 years old. He's got a career goals against average of, coming into tonight of, over 4, an 881 save percentage on the season. I should say over his career, it's 342 with an 889 save percentage. So the, career numbers at the NHL level don't jump out to you, but feels like we see this every once in a while, and we've definitely seen it before with the Maple Leafs, where they go up against some goalie that you think they would light up for 10 goals, and he stands on his head and wins the other team a game. So you got to give your props where it's due, and Alex Lyon tonight standing tall in this victory for Florida. Yeah, just an unbelievable setup there. Even from the start of the day, you watch the skate, Spencer Knight's not available because he's in the NHLPA NHL assistance program. So you're expecting Bobrovsky, but then Bobrovsky is not out there. It's Lyon in the visiting net, although they wouldn't confirm what was going on. Then you see that the Panthers have called up someone to back up Lyon. It's just getting crazier by the moment. So weren't quite sure what was going to happen. But the Panthers needed this. Like, they needed a hero, I guess, right? They were in a 4-game losing streak, really just kind of desperate to put points on the board and try to hang on to their slim chances for a wild card spot right now. Well, maybe slim's wrong. I mean, they are only 1 point back now after tonight. But Pittsburgh does have a game in hand. So, they needed to stop the bleeding, going 4 straight losses and losing out to Pittsburgh and the Islanders in front. Everyone had a lot of expectations, myself included, for the Florida Panthers this year after the makeover that the team did, not too much removed from winning the President's Trophy. So this was kind of due. A goaltender can come out and be strong. I also didn't think the chances were particularly great from Toronto. Yeah, they had the better expected goals and a lot of things, but they didn't really have the snipes, the unobstructed shots in there. Like, I thought Florida did a pretty good job for the most part, boxing out and then really being able to attack off the rush. So I think the stats in this type of game are a little bit deceiving, because I do think that Florida, even though the stats don't show for it, did do a better job of kind of hanging back and just waiting for their opportunities to pounce for a pun that was definitely not intended. Well, I mean, you look at the overall numbers at 5-on-5, and the Panthers did end up with the more high danger chances, with 13 at 5-on-5 in regulation. So, they definitely had more grade A opportunities than the Maple Leafs did tonight. But, after that really tough start, giving up the first goal of the game, but the Maple Leafs they really turned things around and, had the run of the play for a large majority of this one. So definitely one that they would have liked to come away with 2 points. You've got a lead, a 2-1 lead, late in the third period, and then unfortunately Mark Giordano takes the penalty. You got Sam Reinhart with the great tip to tie things up, and then 3-on-3 overtime. Alex Lyon with a couple of big-time saves on Austin Matthews, and the Panthers end up going the other way later in the OT, and they get the winner on a nice little play. Almost made the save, did Ilya Samsonov, which would have been just an unreal post-to-post stop, but still, to come away with a point, I think you're somewhat happy if you're the Maple Leafs. You're still in control of your own destiny, like I said. But let's hear from the head coach of the Maple Leafs, Sheldon Keefe, who says his team let him off the hook.
Whether it's power plays or some of the chances we had at 5-on-5, had opportunities to bury them and build the substantial lead. And we've seen this a lot. We let teams hang around and they end up getting points from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game there. The Leafs did have plenty of opportunities to put this one away, and they cough it up and give the Panthers the extra point, as Florida, of course, is in a tough spot right now, trying to make the playoffs, battling with a couple of teams here in the Eastern Conference. But, if Alex Lyon wasn't the first star of this game, Dave, the first star might have been Paul Maurice, who had quite an entertaining moment in this one in the second period after the Maple Leafs tied the game thanks to a goal from Zach Aston-Reese. It looked like they had taken the lead. Moments later, Austin Matthews with a nice pass to Calle Yarncroke and a 2-on-1, but they did review it, and it ended up being offside. But during that review, the broadcast showed Paul Maurice just going absolutely bonkers on his team, took off the glasses. I joked that his face turned the color of Brother Love. It was so red at one point that I thought like his head was going to explode. That's how mad he was yelling at his team. But let's hear from the head coach of the Florida Panthers about what exactly was going on in that situation.
Well, that was not calculated. I was just honest. That was where I was at. If I could have yelled louder, if I had been found a way to be more profane than I was, I would have. I'm not gifted enough. I needed to channel my father, who's a gifted cursor. That was all I had. I was honest. That's how I felt. So,
what was the message?
Oh, you.
Like without the expletive, what was the message?
There was nothing beyond the expletive.
All right.
What were you seeing that led you to that point?
Oh, what you saw. Unless you're a Leaf fan, which I think was great. On the other side of that, I just had it was more of a cleanse for the coach. A cleanse. I needed to. It was cathartic.
Did you know it was offside? Did you sense that it was offside, or you thought it was a goal at that point?
Oh, I didn't care. Oh, no. Oh, so when I called the timeout, I knew it was offside. And then I thought it was a very nice opportunity to share feelings.
Yeah, he definitely did share his feelings to his team. I mean, if you haven't seen it yet, you definitely need to go check it out. Now, look, Paul Maurice can clearly laugh about it afterwards because his team won that game. If Florida doesn't win that game tonight, I mean, I'm not sure he's as nice talking about that situation because this is a team that has been reeling of late, Dave. But hey, we see it from time to time. Coaches have to, send out their displeasure, and not many people do it better than Paul Maurice in the NHL, I would say.
Yeah, I don't know. This was something else. Like, when he was head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I really enjoyed his explanations and how honest he was about a lot of different things. The one most notable thing, I wasn't there for it, but other reporters talk about the time that when things were really tense, when he was the head coach, he actually left tea bags in the press conference seat. Everyone walked in and there were tea bags on the seats of every seat. And the first question, obviously, is what's with these tea bags? And he's like, I want you guys to have them so that you guys chill out a little bit, just have a sip of tea and calm down. And then, like, I mean, we'd all heard the clip, but I actually didn't know that it actually stemmed that he actually brought tea bags in, which is what created that quote. And I just thought, you know what? He knows how to have fun with the situation and kind of bring things into perspective. And that's why he's been such a coach for so long. And like, I mean, this is a guy who had his NHL career cut short. I think it was because of an eye injury. And so he had to he became a head coach in his 20s, I think. And so he's been around a lot, has been able to adapt with the game and can kind of speak to the new player, the young player. I think he's incredibly articulate. And it's rare when we play clips from the other side, but it was easily the best quote of the night. Just because it was such a big moment in that game. And I appreciated the honest answer as well. So, I think that was probably needed. It was probably the last 4 games of frustration that he's like, if you don't do something about this, you're going to lose your season. Everything's going downhill. And he let out this battle cry, I guess, as a head coach to kind of get his team to snap out of it. And at least it seemed like it worked. So whether this turns into something and they can kind of move past this and snatch up a wild card spot, maybe they look to this if this turns their season around and they go on a run. But I mean, it's refreshing to kind of get those kind of things. And I don't know. I think the Leafs I think the Leafs just didn't have the grade A chances after that. And it was just kind of a whole lot of nothing on the ice. And it's hard to fault the Leafs for that because they really don't have a lot to play for apart from trying to lock up second. And then from there, just figuring out what this team's going to look like to the playoffs.
Well, there were still some positives to take out of this one tonight, and got to begin, of course, with Austin Matthews, who yet again scores a goal. And I mean, we seemingly talk about this every game now with the way that he's gone, and he's playing all over the ice, 200-foot game. He's getting his opportunities. Probably should have had 2 goals in this game, including the OT winner, if not for an incredible glove save from Alex Lyon. But he picks up the go-ahead goal there in the third period, and that line of Mitch Marner, Calle Jarnkrok, Austin Matthews continues to impress once again. And, you know, I just really like the chemistry that they're developing right now. I mean, it just seems like they're all in the right place at the right time. And not that, you know, he didn't have it. Michael Bunting didn't with Matthews and Marner before. But it just, you know, adds a different element with Calle Jarnkrok on that line. It's almost kind of weird, like to have the 2 right shots on that line to, you know, kind of change things up because, you know, Marner, of course, can hit Matthews for a one-timer, but there's also that one-timer availability with Calle Jarnkrok as the left winger. But yeah, it just, you know, continues to kind of add up here the sample size that these guys just work together. And, you know, we say it after every post-game show, it seems right now, that you can't break these guys up. And I'm not sure what it's going to take to break them up, because right now it's trending towards these 3 starting game 1 against Tampa Bay. And I guess, you know, depending on what happens in the first couple of games, maybe there's some movement. But right now, this is locked in as your first line against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, I think so too. And look, I mean, there was a goal between the 2 of those guys that you mentioned that was called back, right? And that was probably one of the nicest ones on the evening. It just got called back, which led to the whole Maurice tirade there, because despite the fact that it was going to get challenged, he still didn't like that his team kind of let players like Jarnkrok and Matthews off the hook and let them enter the zone so easily. Offside be damned. So that was an incredible play. Nice little feed from Matthews to find Jarnkrok and snipe that in. Fortunately, it doesn't count, so he'll have to wait for his 19th goal this season. But Calle Jarnkrok has fit in so perfectly into that spot. There's a reason why Matthews insisted on having Jarnkrok on his wing when there was more experimenting and shuffling going on in the last couple of weeks. Jarnkrok kind of stayed in there when they moved Marner down to kind of help Tavares, when Tavares and Nylander had a couple of games where they weren't kind of firing at that same pace. And so now that everything's back, Jarnkrok has solidified himself into that spot. And you mentioned the 2 right shots, which is kind of weird, but I mean, it does help when you have a left-handed center there where things move around. You know, they know who to find and kind of figure out the spots if someone kind of has to go and move around to the other side. So, and then there's also that niftiness about Jarnkrok, and I haven't asked Matthews about this, about the Jarnkrok's ability to take faceoffs when Matthews gets kicked out or whatever side it's on, and to be able to switch the stick. Like he'll go on his wrong side, depending on what side of the faceoff is, and flip the stick around in order to try and win the faceoff that way, so that it's on the more dominant side, which you don't see any players really do. So there's just a lot to like about the mix with those 3 guys. And so, yeah, if Calle Jarnkrok can kind of fit in and this stays the line for the playoffs and it breeds success, it might, that 4-year, $8.4 million deal might look like the steal of the off season for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
And you know what? I wasn't really planning on having this bigger picture conversation, but you know, since there wasn't a ton to take away from this game tonight, as far as you know what it could mean moving forward here for the Leafs, you know, maybe we can have this discussion right now. And you know, there's been a lot of talk recently about Michael Bunting and him being, you know, bumped down the lineup, and you know, what is his future in Toronto, because at the start of the season, with how hot he was at times, it felt like, okay, this guy's clearly a big piece of this team. They're going to bring him back. You and I talked a lot about what that cap number would be, and now you've got a situation where it's still a small sample size because you go back to last season, you saw what Michael Bunting did with Marner and Matthews. You saw this season at times what he's able to do with both of those guys. But, Calle Jarnkrok can continue to be this guy and be that first line winger alongside Matthews and Marner. I mean, does that kind of, change things with regards to Michael Bunting's future with this team heading into next year?
I think there's a couple things there. There's one, yeah, I think it does. And two, if you checked out Frank Seravalli of Daily Faceoff's top 50 available USAs coming up this summer, the pool is incredibly thin that he's got Bunting number one. And if Bunting is number one, and you're that age where you are, and you look at what he could project to make, it doesn't really make sense for him to kind of stick around here. Like, not at this point. If you could get 6 years times $4 million somewhere else, how do you not take that? Like, you had your chance to play with your childhood team, but NHL careers are very limited. The Leafs probably won't have that much room next year, although, there are a lot of UFAs, and we were talking about locking Bunting down early on and what a number like that could look like. But now that the cap is starting to look a little bit flat, and there isn't that much money out there, but more importantly, the UFA class, like, people point to Patrick Kane, but I don't know what Patrick Kane's going to make next year. Like, it's not going to be anywhere close to what he used to make, and it could be a quarter of that for all we know, depending on where he wants to go. So Michael Bunting looks like the cream of the crop right now for the UFAs, which I didn't really think about because I'm so stuck in this season, but it's kind of something you have to consider if you're Michael Bunting or at least his agent, and you see how thin that pool is. That looks very attractive to test the market, especially with what's going on lately.
Yeah, I just think you've got a situation where Calle Jarnkrok is fitting in, and you look at a guy like Matthew Knies, who is set to make his NHL debut at some point this year, and that guy's going to be on an ELC, and you want to make sure you're getting as much as you can out of that. Someone that we haven't talked about for quite a while because he's been hurt is Nick Robertson, who's working his way back. Like, that's a guy that could be in the mix again next year. And, the reason I bring them up is because that they're all cheaper options than Michael Bunting is expected to be next year. And, Bobby McMahon might be another guy that, fits into this mix. And then, of course, there's Ryan O'Reilly's future. And, if they would possibly entertain re-signing him, is he set to be a UFA? So, there's a lot of different things at work here with regards to Michael Bunting's future, and a lot of different, avenues that the Maple Leafs can go. But, the more and more we're seeing, what's happening right now, it is hard to envision him potentially, coming back and signing a bigger deal. But definitely an interesting conversation that I'm sure we'll have heading into the off season. But getting back to the game tonight, the first line was really good. And so was the fourth line for the Maple Leafs, and that consisted of Zach Aston-Reese, David Kampf, and Wayne Simmons, which is a combination that we have seen at times, but probably hasn't worked too much except tonight. This was probably one of the first times that it felt like these guys were, definitely dominating in the offensive zone, and Zach Aston-Reese picking up a beautiful tip goal tonight. He spoke after this one and says he's actually pretty familiar with Alex Lyon's game.
I've been playing against Lyon for a long time, going back to USHL days, and I've kind of had his number since then. But I was, just trying to keep it simple, get a shot off, and backhand, forehand, low blocker. But he made a good save.
What do you make of how he played tonight? Because he was a late, obviously, call upon with Bobrovsky out. What stood out about his game?
He just got the job done. We had him scrambling a little bit, but we weren't able to capitalize. And, sometimes that's how you have to goalie, and it's just not how pretty it looks. It's just a matter of keeping the puck out of the net, and, he did a good job of that tonight.
Yeah, can't say I expected to see Zach Aston-Reese with a penalty shot attempt tonight, Dave, but a nice save by Alex Lyon to keep it a 1-1 game at that point. But, the fourth line, a lot of discussion heading into the playoffs. What is that, combination going to be? Who's going to be filling maybe those one or two final spots? And, Zach Aston-Reese is a guy that I've kind of wavered on and wondered, does he ultimately have a role in game one against the Tampa Bay Lightning? But at least of late, he's definitely picked up his game, and, the Maple Leafs went out and got him for a reason. possibly thinking towards a playoff matchup against a tough physical team like Tampa. If he's going to play like this, I mean, he's not going to score every night, but if he's going to do, what he did this evening, I mean, he's clearly someone that is going to be in the mix for Sheldon Keefe.
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's any injury of any kind going into this playoffs, he's a lock. I think what happens if Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari come back and the defense looks the way it does right now, then I think Aston Reese is still there when everyone is healthy and they go at 12-6. If they're not set on who their 6 should be and they decide to go with the 7th, then Aston Reese, in my mind, is the one that kind of comes out in that situation. Because I don't see them resting Nola Chari. I don't see them resting Ryan O'Reilly, obviously. And then at that point, where else do you look? Like, I can't see them resting David Camp because they still trust him for the center duties, and he's a perfect fourth line center for them in that regard. So you're looking at a winger, and you're looking at probably one of the newcomer wingers. And so, like, I mean, you're not sitting Sam Lafferty. You got Term attached to him. He has a role. It seems like Zach Aston Reese is the scapegoat if they go 11-7 with everybody healthy. But if they're set on their 6, Timothy Liljegren didn't really participate that much tonight. What was most telling was even though they went 11-7 tonight, and Timothy Liljegren had typically started overtime in the games he was playing, he was not selected to start that overtime. It was TJ Brody. And so that kind of shows you that, Timothy Liljegren is still kind of in the doghouse, and he was kind of thrust as a 7th defenseman more out of roster necessity than anything else. So, Zach Aston Reese is definitely there 100%, 12-6. He's there if there's an injury. The only time I don't see him in the lineup is if they go 11-7 with everybody healthy, and Aston Reese is the guy who sits, along with Simmons, obviously, because Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari are back and there's no other injuries.
Yeah, I think that is probably the way it's going to play out with regards to the forwards. They've got a ton of options and guys coming and that are going to be in the mix. But Zach Aston Reese, definitely giving him props right now with the way he has played of late. So as we said, the first line was good, fourth line was good. The other lines, I mean, the numbers were not terrible. They were okay with regards to, the Kerfoot, Tavares, Nylander line, Bunting, and Lafferty in the mix, going up and down different combinations. They were fine. But, William Nylander, I think, definitely stands out for what happened in overtime, trying to make a move in tight and ends up being costly is because that's the play that goes back the other end and the Panthers score that OT winner. It felt like he was starting to come out of that recent funk that he had been in. I mean, there was that game last week against Florida where he broke out and it felt like, okay, Nylander is back to doing Nylander things, but tonight was a game where he really wasn't in the mix for the most part. And, maybe the bar was set so high, Dave, with what he did earlier this season, but, we're right now in a spot with the way that he's playing. That doubt is starting to creep back in, I think, for some people wondering, is this guy going to be a bit of a ghost? He hasn't been that way in the playoffs the last couple of years. I mean, going back to that Montreal series, he was arguably their best player against the Habs, albeit in defeat, of course, in 7 games. But, where do you think his game is at right now? And are you, concerned at all
with
what
really
you're seeing?
Concerned. I think it's just, I'm not giving him a pass for this type of game. His line mates are also pretty bad in this. I think he was actually the better player of his line mates by the numbers when I look at things. And, he kind of had to every now and then kind of jump up. But I'm not concerned. He just has that ability to kind of flick the switch when he knows it matters. And I think this is it's tough. I think if you're out there, you want to go your hardest, but you don't want to put your body on the line because if you go too crazy and you put yourself at risk from a body standpoint, then, you don't want to feel like you're not there for your teammates. It's a really difficult spot right now that a lot of players find themselves in terms of trying to give it their all, trying to exert skill and dominance, trying to be physical at times too, but making sure you're available and 100% for your team for when it really matters. Because let's face it, these games. I mean, apart from trying to jockey for home ice advantage, even if they do get number 2 in the division, they still have to think long-term and try to catch Carolina and maybe some of those other teams so that if they get to the Final Four, they are the higher seed in that series too. Someone reminded me of that. I'm like, oh yeah, the visual format makes me forget that, combined with the fact that the Leafs haven't been in the Final Four since 2002. But yeah, it's one of those things where, there are ways to kind of keep yourself motivated. And I'm sure William Nylander is finding that, but he's admitted he was pissed off with this play. I thought before tonight, his game was fine, but I think this was more of a symptom of the team overall than it was about Nylander himself.
Yeah, look, I think I'm with you for the most part that he's going to find his game. It's just, there's definitely a fine line, right? As you said, of not trying to go too hard because you don't want to put yourself at peril, but it'd be nice if the game mirrored a lot of what he was doing earlier this season. We know it's there. We've seen it for a large part of the season. And, I think of a guy like Austin Matthews right now who, is throwing his body all over the place and getting really physical and seemingly is trying to ramp up for game 1 of the playoffs. And, it sort of seems like the opposite right now for William Nylander. But as you also mentioned, his line mates, not particularly great tonight, John Tavares and Alex Kerfoot. Coming up on Rinkwide Toronto, we will get to the Bodog line of the day as we'll talk about the power play woes tonight. The Maple Leafs not able to take advantage of the Panthers' poor penalty kill, and Ilya Samsonov back with the team. Another strong performance by him, despite it coming in a losing cause. As the Maple Leafs fall 3-2 to the Panthers, you're listening to Rinkwide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog. Free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at Bodog.net. It's Rinkwide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game. It is Rinkwide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, the place to play free casino games and get the latest sports odds. Rob Wong joined alongside by David Alter, who is at Scotiabank Arena. The Maple Leafs losing 3-2 to the Florida Panthers in overtime. Time for the Bodog line of the day. And full disclosure, Dave, I bet on John Tavares to get a power play point in this one. I made the same bet last week, and he came through. I figure, hey, you've got the Maple Leafs, second best power play in the league. Panthers, one of the most penalized teams, got a pretty bad penalty kill. And the Leafs got opportunities. They had 4 power plays in this one, but were not able to score at all. Overall, it was a pretty ugly power play for the most part for the Leafs this evening. And, there's been moments where it's been red hot and it looks like these guys have figured something out. And then you see a game like tonight and you go, how can they not score a power play goal? Like they just, had a nice little run recently. What is happening now? It's always going to be a conversation when it comes to the power play, especially come playoff time. What are you seeing from the man advantage?
Yeah, so this one kind of got off to an odd start because I believe it was their first opportunity. I'm looking on the ice and I'm like, where the hell's Matthews? And then I look and I see on the bench that Matthews is getting some sort of equipment fixed, and he had to miss a lot of that first thing. And so you had Kerfoot on in his spot. And I think things just kind of got discombobulated and out of rhythm. And when they're out of the rhythm like that to start things off, I'm just kind of like, okay, well, there's, it could be one of those kind of nights. I thought Florida did a good job of boxing them out. It was an unusual thing. It's hard for me to get too critical of the power play because for the most part, they've been good. It's not going to be perfect. But I do think that without having Ryan O'Reilly, they haven't been able to kind of experiment on some of those things. We should also mention, of course, Eric Gustafsson is away from the team right now for personal reasons. And I really liked when he's been in the lineup, the presence that he brought on PP2 and in that game that Riley didn't play against the Panthers last week at PP1. I thought I really liked his shot and his presence there. And so, a lot of what they would have liked to do is PP2 right now. It has no gear, right? Like a lot of the guys and weapons that they brought to kind of bolster and even things out, they haven't been able to do or deploy because of injury and whatnot. So, it's hard for me to be too critical of it right now. I do think they'll find it. If Ryan O'Reilly comes back next week like he's supposed to, I think that'll be a good step to kind of balancing things out and letting PP2 have a bit more time. And then PP1 doesn't feel like they need to be forcing things too much and being on for too long. Because, yeah, I know you don't exert the same energy on a power play, but sometimes when they're on for as long as they are, I wonder if that's really a benefit or if it's more of a detriment.
Yeah, I guess for me, I can understand if you're going up against a Boston or a Carolina, one of the better penalty kills in the league, and you have a tough time. But this is the Florida Panthers, who are not particularly good down a man, and with the prowess that the Maple Leafs have, you would think they'd be able to take advantage of it, but just seemed really discombobulated tonight. And, the passes weren't there. They weren't getting many grade A opportunities. And, you got to tip your cap to the Panthers, of course, with the job that they were able to do to keep the Maple Leafs out of the dangerous areas. I mean, I can think of one moment where, John Tavares was right in front of the net, actually had a really good chance, but he flubbed the shot. So, if he scores there, maybe we're not even having this conversation. But the power play tonight was not able to come through for the Maple Leafs. Meanwhile, the goaltending, Ilya Samsonov, of course, with the new dad bump. I thought he looked really strong after giving up that initial goal, which was a tough one for him, put in a bad spot. Jake McCabe with an absolute meatball thrown to John Tavares, a bad pass there, and of course the Florida Panthers are able to take advantage. But the rest of the way, thought he was really strong. You're always wondering, coming off a situation like he is, where you've got a new child, maybe you're not getting a ton of sleep, first game back, and how's he going to perform? But, just continues to show strong, and coming off that game against the Islanders last week, I think it was a nice bounce back for him. What did you make of Ilya Samsonov's game? Yeah,
I thought it was good, and most important for him to just bounce back and not let, first game back, first shot, or not first shot, I think it was a third shot. It was really early. But just to not let that kind of creep into his psyche, I think it was really important for him to have a good game after what happened on the island. Yeah, he was preoccupied. He kind of had going back home to be with his wife on his mind, but he also went a long time without playing. And then it's so important to be able to come back, have a short memory, and not let how that last performance was from a while ago that he kind of had to sit with, kind of fester. But I mean, going through life changes, you obviously look at the positive. He's a dad now to young Miroslav Samsonov. And so, I think that kind of helped things. He was kind of saying that, he was kind of feeling his edge there and starting to get into it. Wasn't too critical about that goal. He's like, look, it was just a bad bounce. It happens. And he's able to kind of dismiss those things now. I think he has the full trust in the team in front of him that if something like that happens, he's able to just dismiss it as something that happens and not let that shatter his confidence or feel like he needs to do too much in that situation.
Well, let's hear from the Maple Leafs netminder, who says the mental aspect of his game has definitely improved.
Yes, I'm trying to work with this. Sometimes you miss this. Sometimes you get better than last year. I'm still young, 26. Yeah, I'm still teaching every day. I'm trying to get better every day. This is just what I need right now.
Yeah, and that's the thing when it comes to the confidence and the mental part, Dave. It has, wavered at moments this year. You can think back to, when he was having a really rough go midway through the season, talking about his confidence, of course. And I think he was referring to his smile. Wasn't smiling very much because the game was so poor. But, since that point, he's really turned things around and has been really solid for the most part. So I think it's good to be able to recognize it and say, you know what, just have to be better when things are bad, and when things are good, you don't, let yourself get too high. So that's always the mentality you want with your goaltenders. Even if they are having a tough time, you don't want to be too outward and, show your frustration, a la Jordan Binnington, who seems to let people rattle his cage a little bit too often, and maybe it affects him as far as his gameplay goes. But, right now with Samsonov, cool as a cucumber when you see him in net, and, for me, is the guy right now. He's the number one, and if the playoffs were to start today, he's getting the start against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's tough. Like the number one thing that changed maybe my perception of, oh, maybe Murray's going to start making things interesting was when that game against Carolina ended the way it did. And even though I thought Murray played a pretty good game, yeah, there was one or two that you might go back on, but I thought, you know what? He kept them in there. That was a really difficult game. Sheldon Keefe at the end didn't give him the benefit of the doubt anymore. He was kind of sick of the moral victories at that point and said that, you can't win these games if you're expecting us to score 5 every night or whatever the case. And so he pretty much said, and I'm paraphrasing, that we need a savior too. And that's pretty much the message there, that, Murray was good, but he hasn't been good enough. And you haven't had any of those questions about Samsonov, with the exception of that terrible game against the Islanders. Samsonov has given the Leafs a chance to win. He's not giving up a lot of goals in these games, where outside of one game where he only allowed 2 in his return from injury, Murray's given up 4 all the time. Whether it's his fault or not, sometimes you make your own luck, and you're going to have to steal games and be the reason you win if you want to steal the decision from the coach. And Matt Murray has not done that. And so, we've been talking about it on a daily basis who should start. But yeah, like as of right now, if you have to make that decision, I think you go Elias Samsonov. What I don't want to see happen, and I don't think you will see happen, but maybe an excuse. It's an excuse. There was a time where Sheldon Keefe even said, like, when he looked at Murray's record at home and Samsonov's Murray's record on the road and Samsonov's record at home, that it was something that they couldn't ignore. I'm sorry, but you cannot split your goalies based on home and road for the playoffs. It just will not work. The playoffs and the regular season are 2 different things entirely. It's purely coincidental. This is my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree with this. But if you're asked about why you go with Samsonov, you can cite his record at home to at least start games 1 and 2. And then if he's not getting it done and you feel like you have to make a switch, you can then justify Murray's record on the road. And if Murray's able to kind of take the reins and take over, then you kind of make that permanent switch or whatever. So I don't like the straight home road thing. That's not going to happen. But I can see it being a plausible excuse for when you do decide who your game 1 starter is, without worrying about shattering the ego of a 2-time Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, no chance. No chance. I think the Maple Leafs willingly go home and road goalie for a playoff series. Like, that would just be...
And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, anyone who thinks that that's like a legit thing is wrong. Can it be a cloak and dagger situation where you can make it a BS excuse for why you start someone to start? Absolutely. But I don't think anyone in true honesty thinks that that's a strategy that works.
Yeah, that's just total galaxy braining.
Right.
I think if you're trying to go that avenue, but like you said, I mean, I could see that scenario where Ilya Samsonov, isn't very good in the first 2 games at home, and then you make the switch, and you don't even have to cite the home road splits. You can just say, yeah, he wasn't great. We want to give Matt Murray a go here in game 3. And then it makes sense. But, if Ilya Samsonov wins the first 2 games and then they go on the road in Tampa, and it's like, well, Matt Murray's better on the road. We're going with Matt Murray. Like, that would just be one of the most ridiculous things I think I would ever see a team do. So that just seems unlikely. I think what's weird, and we have been talking about the goaltending all season long, and this recent stretch where, sure, Matt Murray, some of these games he's been giving up 4 goals, but he has been making some big saves or coming up in big opportunities. It's still, for me, the sample size of Ilya Samsonov, what he's been able to do over and over again. Has he been perfect every single night? Of course not. But you take away all the context and the narratives, and you just look at the 2 stats and the numbers for both of these guys. Like, it's a no-brainer, right? Like, it's almost kind of crazy to me that people are having this conversation about which goalie do you want in game 1 right now. I mean, one of these guys has a 905 save percentage, the other guy has a 914 save percentage. Matt Murray's almost giving up 3 goals a game, and Samsonov is around 2.5. So it's almost just kind of mind-blowing to me that, with 6, 7, 8 games left here before the postseason, it's like, who do you want to have in net for game one? Like, it's so obvious to me right now that Samsonov should get the first crack. So we'll see. It does seem to be going that way, but I feel like we'll keep having this conversation even leading up to after the regular season is over, unless, Sheldon Keefe comes out and says, we're going with Ilya Samsonov. This is going to be a conversation right up until that announcement has been made for game number 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning.
4 days between the last game of the regular season and the first game of the playoffs. So yeah, it's probably going to be something that's talked about on a daily basis at nauseam.
All right, let's get another injury update here. Ryan O'Reilly, of course, has been working his way back. He has been skating with the team, hasn't taken part in a full practice yet, Dave. But, what is the expectation here for Ryan O'Reilly's imminent return? Because it does feel like it's going to be happening sooner rather than later.
Yeah, so another little nugget. It was funny. When different reporters show up to different days and the same question gets asked, you can see kind of Sheldon Keefe kind of get not a little annoyed, but he'll preface it like we talked about yesterday or make a reference to whatever. But then it was actually funny because he was asked about O'Reilly's status again, even though he answered it yesterday, but he still did give a different nugget today than he did yesterday, which was that the expectation is if all things go well, that he could join the team for practice Friday. Now, one practice does not make a return, I don't think, in O'Reilly's case, but it'll be a significant step. And with the back-to-back, maybe there's an outside chance he can get one of those games, but I think more likely he comes back in the game following because it looks like they're trying to project next week. And so the number one concern with this broken finger is just to make sure there's not a high likelihood of re-injury. And so if that means they need to reinforce it a little more and let him wait. I mean, yeah, I know you want to get this guy kind of back up to speed and get some games in before, but there's a lot of games for him to do that. They've got 3 games on the road then this season. That might be a good spot there to try it, especially when you're going to be resting guys and your third line might be your first line. And that's where you get a lot out of Ryan O'Reilly in that regard. So, it looks like next week is going to be the return, what they're targeting right now. But I think they have to be incredibly cautious because we talked about the Nick Foligno thing. You do not want to mess up how you handle this injury at all. Like right now, we're talking about that big trade with Achari and O'Reilly. And both guys did not play in this game. And so you need to make sure both of those guys are ready. No ifs, ands, or buts. Achari was, I know you didn't ask me about Achari yet, but he was back on the ice, which was a good sign. But I'm concerned about that one because they didn't disclose the nature of that injury. But in Nashville, you can clearly see when the Predators score that second goal, he is involved in an awkward collision with Mark Giordano and Justin Hall, where you see his head kind of snap backwards and he was coming off a head injury. And then after the goal, like he's slow to get up, like he's not reacting while the play's in his own zone. And then after the goal, when he gets up, he's grabbing his head. And, yeah, like it was a good sign. Like when I came in this morning and saw Noel Acciari and Ryan O'Reilly skating together doing the drills, and that's really good. But man, give him the time. Don't play him sooner than he needs to if he's already been knocked around in that same area twice now. And so you're going to need these guys. There's no reason risking for what are really inconsequential games.
Yeah, you're really at the point now where, you can't fully bubble wrap everyone, but you need to make sure you're super cautious about who you let back out there and when, if they're not ready. But clearly the Maple Leafs training staff knows what's best for these guys. And, I don't think they're going to put them in harm's way. That would be absolutely ridiculous if they did decide to go that route and, just give them opportunities to play when they were not ready. But good news that Ryan O'Reilly looks to be on his way back and will be skating with the team possibly as early as this weekend. And then we'll see where things go with regards to his on-ice return for an actual game. One other guy that I wanted to talk about, we mentioned him earlier, but Nick Robertson has been back skating with the team. I think it's unlikely to see, expect him to play at any point this year. I think that maybe the Maple Leafs would have to go on quite a deep run, and maybe some guys would have to get hurt. But I think it's just good to see him back out there. Dave, what can you tell us about Nick Robertson's rehab?
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to be an option unless the Leafs are in the Cup final. But I don't see any other situation. It's great that he's skating. I've seen him skate here, but he's doing just that. Even when he was on the ice with all the other guys who were doing the drills, he was working with a separate skating coach and just skating. Like, that's it. No handling, nothing of pucks. Pretty severe injury. They framed it as season ending for a reason. And then it's another guy who's dealt with so many injuries that they also don't want to risk having him come back too soon. And if people are healthy enough, you start to wonder, is Nick Robertson a better option than maybe guys who are playing more recently with the Marlies at that point, given how long he's been away? And so, they don't want to mess that up. I think Nick Robertson now has a great opportunity to really let his body go into this cryogenic state of full power so that he can withstand a lot. A freak injury, but when Derek Roy hit him along the boards, you start to wonder, right? Like, it looked pretty routine, like a body check, but we made the jokes of Thick Robertson because he talked about all this weight he added to throw the body around and do all those things. But then he gets hurt, and he gets hurt on what seemed like an innocent hit along the corner boards. So they really need to just make sure that they spend this entire spring, summer, and bits of the fall to rebuild this guy so that he can withstand everything. So I don't know. But the thing is, I asked about Nick Robertson. I even wrote a story about it when we were on the road in Carolina. And Sheldon said, you forget, like, it was good to see him and he was feeling good. And you realize when you're doing these pre-scouts, like the one we did against Carolina, how much you miss a guy like him, because he was really good in that game that they played against them back in November. And Carolina has been one of Sheldon Keefe's benchmark for how he feels the Toronto Maple Leafs stack up to the rest of the league. And that was one of Nick Robertson's better games. And so when they're pre-scouting and they see Nick Robertson, they realize how much they miss the guy and how much of a good option he would have been right now, especially now with some of the other guys that are getting hurt. So it's not going to be for a while. And I don't even know if the Cup final is a good spot. But look at me talking about the Leafs and Cup final in the same sentence. So I should just shut up right now.
Yeah, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here with regards to the Cup final and Nick Robertson.
If we're still there and that happens.
That's true. If Nick Robertson is making a return at the Cup final, this will be an all-time prediction right here. You heard it first on Rink Wide Toronto from David Alter. That'll do it for this edition.
Samsonov was going to win the starting job for the playoffs back in the beginning of the year.
That is true. Now, there's still a chance that it won't happen, but you're definitely trending in the right direction with 8 games remaining here in the regular season. The next post-game show will be Saturday night when the Maple Leafs head to Ottawa to square off against the Senators, looking to avenge that loss in the nation's capital from a couple of weeks ago. Make sure to like, review, subscribe to the pod wherever you get your favorite pods. You can follow us on Twitter, RinkWideTOR, at DAlter, at RobWong34, and you can always get the podcast at RinkWideToronto.com. For producer Aaron and David Alter, I'm Rob Wong. You've been listening to Rink Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds where everyone goes to play. It's Rink Wide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game.